Hey, so Tabitha, I'm so glad I get a chance to talk to you and tell you all there is to know about how you can help your clients protect their assets from the high cost of nursing home care. If you haven't noticed lately, the cost of care is just going through the roof. And in Montague County and Kanawha County both, if you can find a nursing home for as low as $11,000 a month, that is really the lowest you're going to find. About 16,000 a month is the highest, but like at 14,000, 13,000 a month, that seems to be where most of them are falling now. It's just crazy. Um,
It's so insane because when people come to us for planning, a lot of times, I don't know where they get this number from, but they seem to think it's only going to be around $3,000 a month. And they are shocked when they get the prices.
Yeah, I mean, assisted living, even for assisted living, I think the lowest cost that I've seen is about 4,500.
Mhm.
And I'm seeing now assisted living even pushing upwards of 8 grand a month. But the nursing home care has just really gotten really outrageous. And to think, 15 years ago,
Mhm.
when I started my practice focused just on elder law, the average cost of a nursing home was $6,000 a month.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's what's causing a lot of people to like misconstrue the prices is they base it on maybe when their grandparents were going into nursing homes.
Definitely.
And yeah, so I'm really interested in learning all about this. So teach me.
All right. So, when we're talking about elder care planning, having an elder law attorney to be able to help you through that is just an absolute necessary. It's a real game changer.
Mhm.
And when you have somebody with my experience on your side, you're going to pay less in the nursing home. You're going to legally save assets. I'm going to teach you all about how to do that so you can help your clients do the same. When we talk about a nursing home situation, it's always going to be the last option. I mean, moving someone to a nursing home, that's only going to happen after all other options have failed, whether that's in home care or assisted living. A nursing home is a place where everybody rightfully is going to want to resist being
Mhm.
until it's just absolutely necessary because the level of care is just too high.
Mhm.
Progressive diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, or serious injuries like a broken hip, even complications from diabetes. I mean, these are things that they're all progressive, and once they progress to a point, it's just nursing home care is unfortunately going to be needed for the large majority of people. Um, but sometimes it's also that you might have a family caregiver who's in the mix, who's been helping their spouse or their parent or grandparent stay at home. And maybe the care has just gotten to be way too much. And so it's going to be time for them to, have to transition into a nursing home.
Yeah, so I had JT Hunter on the show a few weeks back, and I know you and I both know him. And one of the things that we were talking about was how many people just want to refuse to plan for this part of their life. But it just makes the whole process easier if you're aware of the options from the beginning and you're proactively planning for it. So
Yeah.
oh, there it is. That's what we just talked about. Slide's a little bit messed up, but yeah, between 11 and $16,000 a month.
Yeah. And I mean, you're helping people in the financial planning end. How many people have enough savings to be able to cover that large of an outlay monthly for an extended period of time?
No, not only do they not usually have it, but if they did have it, is that really how they want to spend the money?
That's a very good point. As we're going to see as we talk on, you know, the, the nursing home uh, programs that are available under Medicare and health insurance are very limited.
Mhm.
Um, But when it comes to utilizing an elder law attorney, the specialized knowledge of Medicare, veterans benefits, and primarily Medicaid. You know, Medicaid is that one benefit that will pay for a lifetime of nursing home care, but you're limited to no more than 2,000 in countable assets.
Mhm.
So this is one situation where if you wind up in a nursing home, you're not ready in advance, then you're going to miss out on the options that are available to protect assets from having to be spent when Medicaid is available to pay for the exact same long-term care that otherwise costs 11 to 16,000 a month in Kanawha County and Mon County and everywhere else. And when we're looking at this, or at least the way that I look at it, I look at the Medicaid situation and the nursing home situation much like a tax advisor would look at minimizing tax bills. There's favorable provisions in the tax law that allow you to itemize this and deduct this and fill out this form and claim this or claim that to get your lowest tax bill. Well, in an analogous way, the Medicaid program allows you to legally do some very unique and complicated things. It's certainly not a do-it-yourself system, but the net result is a legally minimized nursing home bill.
I just want to throw in one thing here. I have people call me at least once a week asking me to help their parents apply for long-term care Medicaid. And obviously I turn it down. I'm not licensed to do that. It's way beyond my scope. But there's a lot of people out there that kind of take advantage of people that are in this panic mode that are not licensed elder law attorneys. So I just want to put out there, it's incredibly important to check to make sure the person you're working with actually has experience in this field, right?
Definitely.
Okay.
Right. So, and when we're assessing somebody's potential for asset protection, we have to look at their circumstances. Pre-planning while seniors are healthy, that definitely gets the best results. So, and the reason for that is because there's this thing called the 5-year look back, which we'll talk more in depth. And if you can do the things that you would prefer to do to protect your assets 5 years in advance of when you're going to need nursing home care, then the best outcomes are achieved. However, if somebody finds themselves in a nursing home even today with no planning or about to go in one in the very near future, there are still very many favorable tools in my toolbox, so to speak, to help people qualify for the Medicaid benefits and legally save assets.
Okay, wonderful.
So a couple things then when it comes to asset protection for married couples. Now, you might be thinking, well, if my husband's in the nursing home, what protections do I need? I'm the spouse staying at home. Well, as you're going to find out, when it comes to the Medicaid eligibility question, a married couple is viewed as if they're one person for asset eligibility. But typically, folks who hire me to go through the nursing home Medicaid process, for a married couple, we can usually qualify them for Medicaid in as little as 30 days. We can still protect their home. And when it comes to other assets that can be preserved, usually 90 to even as much as 100% is pretty typical. As I said, there's still some very generous planning options that exists. And remember, when we're talking about Medicaid, we're talking about how Medicaid is administered in our state. the federal government administers Medicare, but each state government administers the Medicaid program, which is federally funded. So our state, the way that we interpret the federal guidelines is going to be different from perhaps how Ohio interprets it and so on. So in our discussion today, we're talking about the ways that we can legally protect assets for somebody going into a nursing home here in West Virginia.
Perfect. Okay. And what about people like me who are not married?
Well, for people who are single, because you look like you're a long way off from a nursing home, Tabitha, unless you found some fountain of youth, I don't know.
That would be nice.
But similarly with a single individual, whether they're if they're going into a nursing home today, again, we can usually help them qualify for Medicaid within 30 days. It is still possible to protect their home. And we also have the ability, again, to preserve about 90 to 100% of the remaining financial assets. Of course, it does depend on the circumstances of those assets, as we'll get into our discussion here.
All right. So I do want to point out one thing on this, because I do have people that have tried to do this themselves. So you said that with your help, you can usually get them on Medicaid within 30 days. Let's be
quite often.
Let's be brutally honest here. If someone has not pre-planned for this, they don't know how the system works, and they are attempting to get on Medicaid by themselves through long-term care Medicaid, how long is it realistically going to take them?
So it really depends on their assets. I mean, the typical approach for maybe somebody who doesn't have anything saved up, if somebody goes into a nursing home and let's say that maybe they live in subsidized housing, they have a vehicle, which you can have one automobile. They don't count that against you and your personal belongings. But if you don't have more than $2,000 worth of other assets, then the Medicaid process is going to be handled by the nursing home's business office or admissions office. They'll submit the paperwork, because even when somebody is already under the Medicaid asset limits, it's still some pretty significant paperwork. So you definitely at least want a minimum level of expertise. And certainly the nursing homes are familiar with how to submit a basic Medicaid application for somebody who's already going to be financially eligible.
Okay. All right. Because I've had some people who have had assets that have tried to do it themselves, and months later, they come back like, please give us that guy Brent's number.
Yeah, it's definitely not for the do-it-yourselfer. And so here in a nursing home, you have to first be hospitalized for an injury or an illness, have a skilled care need. So physical therapy is probably the most common skilled care. If you've been ill, taken a bad fall, and have been in the hospital for treatment, that's when you can get skilled care. Now, if you just go directly from your home to a nursing home, there's no Medicare available. And so then if you're going direct from a nursing home, or if Medicare, your health insurance is ended and you need to stay, then you're going to be a private pay patient paying 11 to 16 grand a month until you qualify for Medicaid. And that's where Medicaid is, I think, the most important benefit going, because it will pay for a lifetime of nursing home care once you financially qualify.
Okay. I think some of these we might have already gone over. So we went over a little bit how Medicare coverage works with it, and then Medicaid basics.
Yeah.
You probably have a little bit more you want to say about
that.
Yeah,
let me cover this again. Medicaid is federally funded. Each state runs their own program. I think on balance, our state is pretty generous in its interpretations compared to some other states like Ohio. You will find in the state of Ohio, they have interpreted the federal Medicaid rules in such a way that tend to really capture as much of their state residents' assets as possible. We're on, I would say, on the more liberal side of that. And to be eligible to be in a nursing home, you have to meet the medical eligibility criteria. And if you're somebody, if you have a loved one with a serious cognitive impairment, such as dementia, something that may be a surprise is that cognitive impairment actually doesn't get included in the first round of medical eligibility, simply because they're looking to see, does somebody lack at least or have deficiencies in at least 5 activities of daily living that require substantial assistance. So things like bathing, personal hygiene, grooming, ambulating, transferring. And so somebody with dementia so bad that they couldn't be left alone, but they're perfectly healthy otherwise and even still capable of showering and dressing and bathing themselves. And this might be a surprise. They're not medically eligible to be in a nursing home. But then when it comes to asset limits, as I said, 2,000 worth of countable assets. We'll get into what's counted and what's not in a little bit. And then income limits. So to be in a nursing home and qualified for Medicaid, your monthly income simply must be less than what the Medicaid program pays for the bed in the nursing home.
Okay, that was the distinction I didn't know, actually.
Yeah, and that's because it's usually a distinction that doesn't come up. And if you think about this, if the Medicaid program is paying, $10,000 a month for the particular bed in that nursing home, if your income is less than the $10,000 a month from Social Security, pension, and any other sources, then you qualify. If it's over, then we have a problem where you can't qualify. It's a very rare person anymore that I find who has income over that. Certainly some higher level retirees who have defined pension plans. And sometimes I'll come across what I'd call the trifecta, where you have somebody who retired from the military as an officer and has a pension through the military, retired from federal government with a civil service pension, and retired from state government with a state pension. Every once in a while, once in a great while, I find somebody with those 3 pensions combined that may put them over the cost of the bed that they're in at the nursing home. Now, it's kind of interesting. I've had a scenario before where we've actually had to move somebody to a different nursing home because the reimbursement rate in that nursing home was higher than their income. It was like 12 grand a month and their income was 11 grand a month. But
wow.
Crazy things. But okay, let's talk about it. It's real easy for us to jump down a rabbit hole. The purpose of our conversation is try to convey these concepts, and wow, we can quickly go down various holes into more complex issues. I'm going to try to keep it simple. So if you wind up in a nursing home, then what we're doing is called the spend down process. And if you've had a loved one go into a nursing home, you've undoubtedly heard the word spend down. And what that means is that the Medicaid program doesn't take somebody's assets if they have too much in assets. The Medicaid program simply says, come back, reapply after you have spent your excess assets. So you just can't give things away. So we're talking about where like Medicare stops paying, now you're going to be faced with these bills of 11 to 16,000 a month. So private paying certainly will spend down your assets, whether you want it that way or not. Assets have to be depleted down to $2,000, but you can't just give your assets away to your kids or your grandkids or your favorite church, mission, or charity. You have to spend it on approved purchases, goods and services. And then once the assets meet that certain level, then the senior can qualify for Medicaid.
Okay. So lots of complicated steps.
Yes. Yes. Okay. And so it all begins with West Virginia residency, and good news, somebody can move to West Virginia, land in a nursing home, and then apply for West Virginia Medicaid. Some states like Ohio have in-state presence requirements. Last I heard, Ohio in some situations required a person to be physically present within their state for at least 6 months before they could qualify for Ohio Medicaid. Yeah. And so, but not in West Virginia. You can literally move to West Virginia and qualify for West Virginia Medicaid. You have to meet that medical eligibility test I talked about. That's performed by physicians. Then that's sent to the state for review and approval. And then asset eligibility, as I mentioned, and then income eligibility. Income has to be less than the reimbursement cost for the bed you're in.
Okay. So let's pause for 1 second.
Oh, okay, sure.
Why should anyone listen to you? Who are you to tell us?
So, I'm an attorney, graduated from WVU Law in 2000. I'm licensed in West Virginia, of course. This is my 25th year as a licensed attorney. 16 years ago, I decided to open my own law firm, and my practice focus is in elder law. And my favorite thing to do is help people protect their assets from the high cost of nursing home care. So if you have a loved one going into a nursing home, you can hire me so that the things that we're talking about, we can use all of the legal tools to qualify them for Medicaid and legally save assets for the spouse at home or for the kids or the grandkids, whatever the preference is. And I have offices in both Morgantown and Charleston. I live in Morgantown. My office has been there 16 years. Then 12 years ago, I opened an office here in Charleston. I'm right off the Westmoreland exit in Dr. Simpson's dental office building on the first floor. And I have full-time employees at both offices. And we're available for consultations. And when I say we, I mean it's me. I'm the only attorney, so I'm the one you would meet with. And I also do other things that are important to seniors. I do your legal planning documents like a last will and testament or a power of attorney, or setting up an asset protection trust. Those are things I do as well. Sometimes you might have a spouse or a parent who becomes incompetent. They never signed powers of attorney. And so guardianship in the court system needs to happen. And I'm also available to help people through that process as well.
Yeah, and I think we're going to do another seminar here coming up pretty soon on those aspects.
Yes, we will definitely do a seminar coming up on estate planning. That's for sure. The basics of wills and powers of attorney and trusts and things like that.
And if anyone cares to know about me, my name is Tabitha Justice. I'm the CEO of Just Us Retirement. And we focus on retirement and Medicare. But one of the things that I think is really important about what we do is we try to bring in the aspect that who cares if you have the best health insurance if you don't have all these other parts included in on it, like planning for long-term care, having those powers of attorneys. And so that's something we're really big on, proactive education. We have offices in Hurricane, Milton, Point Pleasant, Parkersburg, and Beckley now. Hopefully we'll be up there with you soon in Morgantown, Brent. So, that's representing a lot of what we're doing here today with you, is like making people understand Medicare is not enough to cover these expenses.
That's right. That's right. Yep. So let's talk about maybe a little bit of a bright spot in all of this. Let's look at the excluded assets for Medicaid eligibility. So these are assets that you can keep, go into a nursing home, and qualify for Medicaid. And the first one is your primary residence and all adjoining land. So even if your primary residence is on a farm, all of the land that is connected or adjoining to your home is excluded. Now, if there's a road that cuts through it, they ignore that. Even if the land's been bought in several different deeds, they ignore that. There's just two conditions. The equity value must be less than $730,000. That's not a problem because they go off of what the county assessor says it's worth. And you have to have an intention to return home if you get better. And that's where I like to say the West Virginia Medicaid program believes in miracles, because you might not medically have a chance of coming home. We don't want to deny the miracles that do work before us. But as long as somebody says you'll go home if you get better, then they ignore your home, meaning they don't make you sell it, turn it into a pile of money, and then spend that money on care. Now, I know some of you have heard this rumor, oh, if I go into a nursing home, the state will take my home. That's not exactly true. But what could happen is at your passing, if you haven't set up a protected home ownership arrangement, the state would normally have the right to put a Medicaid recovery lien against it and then get repaid out of its sale. But we'll talk more about that later. So other excluded assets, you can have one automobile used for basic transportation and the value doesn't matter. There's no value limitation on that. You can have household goods, personal belongings. You can have a prepaid funeral contract. You could have a burial plot, anything that's set up as far as a prepaid arrangement for cremation, funeral, burial, that sort of thing. It's all excluded if you wind up in a nursing home.
Okay.
Yep. Now, countable assets. We're talking about everything that is not excluded as a countable asset if it can be turned into cash. So money in bank accounts, checking, savings, credit unions, CDs, investments, CDs, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, IRAs, pension accounts, and additional real estate. So if you have real estate that isn't your home or attached to it or joining it, I bet that's worth more than $2,000. So that's the big thing that I see people caught with. If they don't have a protected arrangement to own their real estate, then if it's not their home and not adjoining their home, they may very well have to be forced to sell it in order to qualify for Medicaid. Luckily, though, there's several options available. In addition to real estate, other than your residence, the additional vehicle, the recreational equipment, boat, camper, motorhome, side by side. If you're a farmer, livestock, farm equipment, those are all things that could be turned into a pile of cash, and if so, then they're going to be counted, meaning that you'd have to turn them into cash and spend down before Medicaid would pay for your care.
Yeah, Brent, I'm just going to say on this too, we see this a lot with additional property for people wanting to qualify for savings programs with Medicare. They may have property, a parent deeded to them that's only worth like $400 or something. It's a small parcel, that it will knock you out of some of these programs. And it's, it's again, one of those things that people were proactive about it. They would know it before they applied.
Right, definitely. Yeah. So we're going to talk about protections for the spouse in the nursing home.
Okay.
And again, I had alluded that if you are married, one of you stays in the community and one of you goes into the nursing home. All assets owned by both spouses, regardless of whose name it's in, is counted to determine Medicaid eligibility. I realize that's probably not fair, especially for people who married later in life, brought their own separate assets into the marriage, even had a prenuptial agreement. The Medicaid program doesn't care. They look at a married couple as one person for asset eligibility. So if husband goes into the nursing home, assets that husband owns, assets by him, asset that husband owns by himself, assets he jointly owns with wife, and assets that wife owns by herself are all counted to determine husband's eligibility. And so the husband himself can't have more than 2,000 in countable assets. Of course, the wife staying at home can keep the home, the most valuable vehicle, household goods, all without counting against her. But then out of the remaining assets, if the remaining assets are less than $31,584, well, then the spouse at home actually gets to keep everything.
Okay.
Because, there's this countable asset exclusion that's a minimum of $31,584. Now, it does go up to a maximum of $157,920, but that doesn't mean the first $157,000 is excluded. What it means is they'll let you have that minimum amount for the spouse who stays at home of $31,000. But if the countable assets are more than $62,000, then basically the spouse at home gets to keep half, up to $157,000. So if the couple had $314,000, the spouse at home could keep $157,000, but everything above that amount is subject to spend down.
See, again, I don't know how people think they can try to figure this out on their own. That's so complicated.
Yeah, and I do include kind of a way to help you understand this. And I just alluded to it, but we've got the steps on the screen. So we look at the couple's total countable assets and the value as of the day that the one spouse goes into the nursing home. And so, the higher that number is on the day of admission, the more the nursing home or the more the spouse at home gets to keep.
Okay.
We compare that to that figure of 31,584. And if it's less than that, then the spouse at home gets to keep everything. If it's more than that, divide it by 2. But if the division by 2 yields less than 31,584, the spouse at home gets to keep that amount. Anything above it is subject to spend down. But again, if they've got more than 62,000 of countable assets, you just divide it by 2. Spouse gets to keep half, up to a maximum of 157,920.
Super easy math.
Yep. And so here's some things to consider when we're looking at how do we spend down assets and transfer assets in a way that'll help somebody qualify for Medicaid. So we're looking at reducing countable assets We're looking at strategic transfers, and these are methods that are going to be included to transfer assets without incurring Medicaid penalties, which there are a few. We have to also look at what the tax considerations are. If the husband's gone into the nursing home permanently and the wife's at home, and husband has $1 million in an IRA, well, if we just liquidate that, pay tax on it all, 340,000 or more is going to go to paying the tax liabilities on that. Mm-hmm. So if you wind up with $340,000 of immediate tax consequences to deal with a nursing home problem that's $16,000 a month that might have a small duration based on the remaining life of the person, that's why the tax consequences have to factor into this. I can't stress that enough. Obviously some of you are going to take away from this things that can be done. And yes, you're going to think, okay, I can do these myself. Mr. Van Dyson said, my husband goes into the nursing home, we'll just cash out his IRA and give it to me. But if that costs a whole lot of tax consequences to do that, we need to really look at what those consequences are versus what the realistic expected out-of-pocket nursing homes are going to cost, because tax consequences in this situation can often be a barrier to getting somebody eligible, simply because the chances of a person not needing an extended stay may very well make it appropriate to then just pay out of pocket for the short period of time that perhaps that person has left.
Yeah, that's again one of those other things, like, people will do a fire sale for their home, a sale for, just do all these accounts without meeting with someone like you first. It's so important to meet with an attorney to help you.
Yeah, and in many cases, we can still protect the home even last minute. And a lot of people just jump to selling the home because they think that's going to be an issue. So when we're talking about, trying to balance Medicaid eligibility against financial obligations, tax issues, and the client's personal situation and objectives, there's much more to the analysis than just move this money here to get someone qualified. We need to look at the tax and non-tax implications of every move.
Yeah, because it's just like retirement planning. You can't just do what your neighbors did. Like, if it matters your personal situation. So, yeah.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so how does the Medicaid program stop you from giving it all away to qualify? Well, I mean, they really can't stop you from giving it all away. But if you give it all away and then want Medicaid and apply for it within 5 years of giving it all away, you're not going to be able to get the only benefit that'll pay for long-term care. Okay, so let's talk about this. When you apply for Medicaid, now this is the day that the application for Medicaid is submitted, not the day that you go into the nursing home. So boy, if you've made a bunch of high dollar gifts or given away property and you think it's just about 5 years, you'd better get the deed and find out the exact day of the transfer. Literally, you could apply for Medicaid one day before that 5-year period would have expired and create a whole period of ineligibility. So when you apply for Medicaid, the Medicaid program then looks at all gifts and asset transfers for less than fair market value that's been made over the past 5 years to determine if a penalty is going to be imposed. And basically, for every $11,276 given away, that's 1 month that Medicaid won't pay. Now, when does that penalty start? When you're in the nursing home and penniless, that's when the first penalty starts.
Okay.
So if you've gone into a nursing home, you've given away 110,000, you apply for Medicaid, you report the gift, then that's a 10-month period of time. Medicaid won't pay. Uh, right. Now, if you've given away 110,000 but go in with 50,000, that 10-month period won't start running until you spent that $50,000. So if you're thinking, well, I got 50, that'll get me 5 months of nursing home care. So then I've only got to come up with money for 5 more months. No, it doesn't work that way. Now, you can fix a Medicaid penalty. If you gave your kids 110,000 bucks, they still have it. And if they're willing to give it back to you, then
Yeah.
now that that's in your hands, the penalty's gone. Now you have 110,000. We're going to have to do something with that, but we're going to have a proper planning solution to where we're going to be able to handle that. Now, Tabitha, I notice we're just about at the 45-minute mark. Do you think it'd be wise if we stop right here and make this part one, and then pick up here and start part two?
I think we're okay.
You think we're okay? Because you've been asking some really good questions, and this might wind up going another 45 minutes on top of where we're at. Okay.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and pause this today,
Okay.
and then we'll pick up again in a week or so, and we'll finish it.
Okay, I think that would be best. We've got a lot of material, and I don't want people dropping off just because 45 minutes already a pretty good chunk of time to sit and listen.
Yeah, and because I really want to talk more about this when we come back to you, because I feel like this is something that gets a lot of people in trouble.
Right. Now we've got to the point where I'm going to start revealing all of the ways that people can legally protect assets. And it's quite shocking, quite frankly, when people learn, because remember, we're not hiding assets. This is all legal. When we apply for Medicaid, when I submit an application for Medicaid for somebody, all of the planning methods are disclosed. This is completely legal. We're not hiding assets under the mattress or in the sock drawer. That's illegal. That's like working a job under the table and never paying taxes. So I look forward to coming back for part two.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Brent, thank you so much, and we'll pick up soon. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye. Hey, Tabitha. I want to just recap where we left things off last time. We were talking about how the Medicaid program penalizes eligibility if you give assets away, money away, property, and then apply for Medicaid within 5 years. All right. So I told everybody that we were going to wind up really getting into the best part of all of this today. And that's what I'm ready to do. I'm ready to reveal all the ways that we can legally protect assets and help share that information with everyone who's watching.
All right. I'm ready. Teach me your ways.
All right. Let's do it. Hit the next slide, please. All right. So when we have somebody go into a nursing home, whether they're single or whether they're married, here are some acceptable ways to spend down your assets, meaning spending assets on things other than paying out of pocket for nursing home care costs. Because remember, if you've gone into a nursing home with more than $2,000 in the bank, to get eligible, you have to spend it, not give it away. So the first option is paying off debts.
Okay.
If you've got money in the bank and you've got a mortgage against your home, if the choice is pay off or pay down your mortgage versus spending all of that money on nursing home care, I mean, it's pretty obvious spending it to pay down or pay off the mortgage, especially if you wound up being able to go home. You're going to go home to an empty bank account. Wouldn't it be nice to have a paid off mortgage too?
And how many people do you think understand that they can use the money for that instead?
Probably not many. I mean,
Mm-mm.
certainly that's what experience tells me when I share these ideas with other people.
Mm-hmm.
So paying off debt, mortgage loan, home equity loan, car loan, credit cards, medical debts. Now, sometimes I get the question, can I pay off my granddaughter's student loan? Remember, we can't make gifts of assets, right?
Oh, yeah.
But if grandma is legally obligated to repay that loan, meaning she was a co-signer, if
Mm-hmm.
grandma was a legal co-signer on the loan, then she is legally obligated to pay that loan if it goes into default. So you can't pay off somebody's debt just as a gift. If you're going to pay off debts, it has to be one that you're legally obligated on. So paying off debts.
Okay, can I ask a question? Because now
Yes.
this has me thinking.
Okay.
All right, so what if you're a co-signer on like your kid's house or your kid's car payment? Does that count?
Yes, it does. As long as you're legally obligated to pay off that debt, if there's a legal obligation to pay it off, because kind of the thinking is, well, with a co-signer, oh, I only have to pay that off if my son or daughter defaults. Well, by the time they default, your credit is messed up too.
Mm-hmm.
Really, you're obligated to also pay that loan right from the beginning. It's just you're there in their mind, at least, and probably in your mind too, in the backup position of paying it if they don't.
Very interesting. I'm gonna have to talk to my parents about co-signing some stuff for me.
Home improvements. All right. Remember, your home doesn't count against you as long as the equity is less than 730,000, and that's not a problem. So if you've got a pile of money, why not spend it making improvements and repairs to your home, which isn't counted against you? Now, hurry up, large scale home improvements, that's usually not doable because remember, every month that goes by that you haven't spent all the money, you got to pay the nursing home bill, 11 to 16,000 a month. So here's some really quick home improvements that if you need or want them can be beneficial. Floor coverings, appliances, heating and air conditioning system. Those are things that, there's plenty of vendors out there within a couple of weeks you can get done and paid for. Now, if you need like a major home renovation, the good contractors, the ones who are reputable, will do a good job and not just take your money. They all have wait lists. So yeah, maybe you've got a direct line to a contractor who's reputable and does good work, who's going to drop everything and then jump on your repair or your renovation. Well, that's just not usually what my clients have available to them. But basically, it's typically when we're looking at repairs and renovations, it's going to be what can be done fairly quickly so that money can be spent and then we can apply for Medicaid. Purchasing a new automobile. So if you've got a 10-year-old Buick and you're going into the nursing home, even if you may never drive again, you're allowed to have one automobile as long as it's used for basic transportation. So you could sell that vehicle, trade it in, get yourself a new primary vehicle or even a used primary vehicle. And if you think about this, if your car's on its last legs and the only reason why you've got 30 grand in the bank is because you didn't spend it on a new car, think about this. If you got well enough to go back home, if you spent all of your money paying for nursing home care and you're going home to that worn out car and no money in the bank, see where I'm going with that?
Mm-hmm.
Why not replace that vehicle and park it right outside the front door to the nursing home. I've got a client who has his favorite pickup parked right outside the exit
Aw.
door, and he'll probably never drive again, but it's there. He could, in fact, his brother-in-law brings him, comes every week to visit him and takes him for a spin in it.
I love that. Love it.
But why not spend that money to get a good used or a new vehicle? Okay, even if you're not going to drive again, you can have one automobile. Now it has to be used for basic transportation. I had one person say, well, can I go get that 63 split window Corvette collector car I always wanted? No, you can't have a 1963 Corvette collector car. That's not a car used for basic transportation. All right. Now you could go buy the brand new one. That'd be allowed. Not very practical, but hey. Okay, so you can spend the money paying off debts, making home improvements, purchasing a vehicle. You could also purchase personal items, furniture. Maybe you need a new laptop, computer, or you need an iPad. Personal items, things like that, or prepaying expenses. If you do have a home and you're going into a nursing home, they do let you keep it. But once you've spent all of your money, you're not going to have any funds available to continue to pay the upkeep and maintenance. So making sure you've prepaid your fire and casualty insurance, making sure your real estate taxes are paid up. There's even a couple of utility companies, you can pay them ahead by several $100s, prepaying funeral and burial expenses. That's a biggie. If you haven't done that, even if you're going to have cremation with a funeral service, that's still going to be 10,000. If you're going to have just basic cremation and nothing else, that might be 3,000 to 4,000. But hey, go get that prepaid. A pre-need funeral plan is safe. They're all registered with the state attorney general's office in case the funeral company goes out of business. You've got protections that way. So prepaying your final expenses. If you don't do that, maybe you're pushing that off onto other family members when you don't have to. So those are the 5 methods of spending down assets. We're spending it to pay off debts, prepay expenses, or purchase or improve assets that are not counted in order to convert that pile of money into something that's not counted is going to be preserved. All right.
All right. That's very helpful, I think. These are so many things why it's so important to use an attorney, because a lot of people don't even know this is an option.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how when we have a married couple with one at home, and the Medicaid program refers to the spouse at home as the community spouse, we're going to talk about how excess assets above the amount that the spouse normally gets to keep can be put into an annuity for the spouse at home, as opposed to just spending all that money on nursing home care or spending it to pay off debts or buying a different car. So this is a great way for a married couple with one at home and one in the nursing home to where we can convert excess money into an income stream for the spouse at home, because the spouse at home, her income does not count for the nursing home spouse's eligibility. Okay.
Oh, so the assets count, but the income doesn't count.
That's right. So we're looking at shifting excess assets into a Medicaid compliant annuity for the spouse at home that's going to give her monthly income. All right. So to be Medicaid qualifying, the annuity has to be irrevocable, which means you can't cancel it. Non-assignable, meaning you can't like then sell it to someone like J.G. Wentworth who buys annuities. It can have no cash value. It has to make equal monthly payments to the community spouse for a period of time not to exceed her actuary expected lifespan based on whatever her age is at that time. Here's the downside. The state of West Virginia has to be named as the primary beneficiary of the annuity up to the amount that Medicaid has paid if the spouse at home passes away before the annuity pays out. All right. Okay. So the catch is, and hey, if I'm the spouse at home and the choice is spend hundreds of thousands of dollars paying for nursing home care or get that covered with Medicaid by shifting all the excess monies into an annuity for me. Well, okay, so what if the state gets a piece of that? If I die before it finishes paying out, at least I had, the thousands of dollars a month in income that came from it, right?
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing, and what you're going to discover about many of these strategies. When this law about annuities came out in 2005 at the federal level, annuity payouts were typically 8 to 20 years long. And so when they created the law, one of the get-arounds that had been in use up until then was people would take a lump sum of money and put it into an annuity that pays out one big amount 10 years from now, so it would go to the kids, right? Yeah. And so the 2005 federal law, which has been adopted by all the states, then said, okay, we're going to stop that by making sure that all the payments are equally monthly, can't be longer than the person's life expectancy. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so they passed the law, and a couple months later, a couple of annuity companies said, hey, for you, spouse at home is trying to get your spouse in the nursing home eligible for Medicaid, we'll sell you a 2-month annuity so that you can move all your excess money into an annuity instead of spending it on nursing home care. And then however much is put into that annuity is then going to be paid out to the spouse at home in as little as 2 months. Isn't that crazy? See, when they made the law, they didn't put a short-term limit on how short annuities could be because they didn't foresee that. That wasn't a thing. Mm-hmm. Annuities were running anywhere from an 8-year payout to a 20-year payout. So because the law doesn't include that limitation, then this is completely legal, and we help people do this all the time. If I have a married couple, one in the nursing home and one at home, whatever the amount the spouse at home gets to keep, she keeps, plus the home, the car, the household goods. Anything above the amount that has to be spent goes into this 2-month annuity for her. That allows me to get the spouse in the nursing home eligible for Medicaid. A month later, the spouse at home gets the first half of the pile of money that was moved to the annuity. Another month, she gets the rest of it. So as long as she lived 2 months, she got all of the annuity money. Isn't that crazy? It's
literally insane. But I think I remember you telling me once before, and I always keep this in my head as an analogy. All of these laws were written with little leeways in them, and all you're doing is pointing them out.
That's right. At a time, and we're talking about 2005, right? Back in 2005, there were members of Congress that may have been worried about their own spouse or their own parent going to a nursing home. Well, times have changed. I think if you look at the financial worth of anybody in Congress now, none of them have to worry about qualifying for Medicaid. Sadly, we won't go any further than that.
I hadn't thought about that before, but you're right.
Yeah. So, and it's just like our tax law. There's all these ways that if you're if you're educated enough, you get a CPA or tax professional
Mhm.
to help you get your lowest tax bill. Same way with Medicaid. You get yourself an elder law attorney. They're going to help you get the lowest nursing home bill by using the favorable parts of the law that allow you to then save those assets. Nobody would go to the IRS with a blank check. Why go to the nursing home with a blank check? It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. This is such a good webinar.
So I want to put this a little bit more into a more comprehensive example. Okay. I like using examples to make these concepts seem more real. So let's talk about John and Rose. Okay. So in my example, John's gone into the nursing home. They own a home, a car, household goods, personal belongings. They have $150,000 in savings. All right. John's wife, Rose, is staying at home. Uh, Rose is allowed to keep one half of the total assets on the based off of the value the day that John went into the nursing home. So she gets to keep 75,000 of that for herself. John gets to keep 2,000 for himself. So that means the remaining 73,000 is the amount that needs to be spent down in order for John to qualify for Medicaid. Now, if we go to the next slide. All right, so Rose can take the 73,000 and purchase a Medicaid compliant annuity. Now she does this after John goes into the nursing home and with the help of an elder law attorney. And just, I'm an attorney. I don't sell financial products. There are several companies that do sell short-term Medicaid compliant annuities. As an attorney, I don't sell financial products. I put my client in touch with those sources that do. All right. Mm-hmm. So Rose spends $73,000 to purchase the Medicaid compliant annuity. At the beginning of the next month, John is eligible for Medicaid. All right. So John is eligible for Medicaid. The day after John qualifies for Medicaid, Rose can become a millionaire. At that point, it doesn't matter what she has in the bank. So remember, she got to keep her home, household goods, personal belongings, automobile. She got to keep 75,000 out of the 150,000 that was in the bank. John got to keep 2,000. So the 73,000 that went into the annuity for 2 months, for each of 2 months, she's going to get 2 equal payments of 36,500. If she lives long enough to get the second payment 2 months down the road, she has recovered the 73,000 she put into the annuity. Plus, she got to keep the 75,000 as her community spouse allowance. John get to keep $2,000. Of course, the home, household goods, personal belonging, vehicle, none of that counted anyways. Isn't that crazy? Now, the annuity companies that offer these short-term annuities, they do charge an upfront fee. And like this is an annuity that's really just designed to hold monies for a short time and return it. And so they charge an upfront fee, like 1.5% of the total money that goes into an annuity. I mean, that's a bargain considering what we're able to achieve and essentially save this couple tens of thousands of dollars a month that would have otherwise possibly been spent on nursing home care. And in our example, because it's based off a real life example, Rose didn't want to spend excess money making home improvements. She had a 10-year-old Buick. It was perfectly fine. She didn't want or need to spend money on a new vehicle. She didn't have any debts. There were no debts to pay off. She already prepaid her funeral expenses. If it wasn't for this annuity option, she would have really been forced to
Mhm.
just either buy things she didn't want or need, or pay that money each month on the nursing home bill. So, I mean, this is really a godsend in the Medicaid program. And this is part of federal law. So long as federal law, and this part was created in 2005, as long as federal law still permits this, this is going to be an available option.
Hmm.
Yep.
Now I'm wondering if it'll last forever, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
So I could tell you in 2015, Congress passed a law they didn't eliminate the use of these annuities,
Uh-huh.
but if it would have stood, that law would have effectively rendered use of them impractical.
Okay.
But the sitting president, Obama, vetoed that bill, not because of this that was in it, because remember, bills that come across presidents' desks rarely only have one issue.
Mhm.
That would have been one of many things within that bill before the sitting president, and it was vetoed. It didn't become law. Now, that could be something that the current Congress picks up and gets passed. I don't know. There's certainly been talk of making some changes, some money-saving changes in Medicaid. And over the past 16 years that I've been doing this, and even before I got into this, kind of, the legislatures in Congress, they get to a point where they're like, oh, we need to cut a little bit of savings off Medicaid. Oh, look, here's a planning method a couple people are using. Let's just stop that as a planning method. And so they effectively break into my legal toolbox and take one of my favorite tools. And so, up to this point, we've been talking about last minute planning options, spending down assets. I think it's safe to say those spending options are going to remain. But when it comes to things like the annuity, I wouldn't be surprised if they do make a small change to the law to try to force some additional people to spend money on care instead of move it to an annuity. That would be a simple change.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Now we're going to talk about transfer on death deeds. So in West Virginia, if you go into a nursing home, remember, they don't make you sell your home. But if that home is owned solely by you at your death, to where it would pass to somebody else, either through your will or through your estate without a will to your heirs, well, then normally the state would have a right to recover what Medicaid paid for your care. So here is a great option to avoid that. It is called a transfer on death deed. Think of it as what it really is. It's a beneficiary deed. Just like you can name a beneficiary on a life insurance policy or on an IRA, this special deed allows you to name a beneficiary for your real estate on your deed. So if you're in a nursing home and you're already eligible for Medicaid, or you're about to do this, this can be done today. There's no 5-year look back on this beneficiary deed called a transfer on death deed. And the reason for that is you're not giving somebody ownership today. You're giving ownership to somebody to receive this property at your passing. And so for that reason, this is not considered a current present transfer of ownership that would cause a Medicaid penalty. All right. And so, when you create a beneficiary deed like this, if you're the owner of the property, you are still the 100% owner of that property until your death. You could change your mind and do away with the deed. You can change your mind on who you want it to go to. But in the nursing home Medicaid context, what it does is it means that the beneficiaries you name in the deed take ownership of the home at your passing through the deed instead of through your will or your estate. And as a result, the state is legally cut off from recovering the Medicaid payments made on your behalf. The reason for this is because under current under the current state Medicaid program that's been approved by Centers for Medicare Medicaid Services,
Mhm.
the state only collects this lien as an estate creditor would collect a claim. So simply by changing your deed to a transfer on death deed and naming who the beneficiaries are, you have to record that deed in the county where the real estate is located before your passing. If you do that, it legally cuts off the state's right. There's no Medicaid
Crazy.
disqualification claim, right? So, one potential limitation, the state could change the way that they collect liens. And if they did, then this would not be a protected option. I'll give you an example. In the state of Ohio, if you're in a nursing home and eligible for Medicaid, at the end of 13 months, if you haven't already sold your home, they will put a lien against your home during your lifetime.
Wow.
Yes, our state does not currently do that. So if our state decided to change its Medicaid recovery program to then put liens against homes prior to death, then the transfer on death deed would not offer any protection. Now, we have another protection method. I call it an asset protection trust. That's something you can set up, but it has to be set up 5 years before Medicaid.
Mhm.
And so, what I like to, when I look at a transfer on death deed, it's a tool. And if you're using it to avoid a Medicaid lien, it's an easy tool to use last minute. As long as you're mentally competent and can comprehend and understand, or if you're not, as long as you have signed a power of attorney that gives specific powers to create this kind of deed, or maybe you just decided, I'm going to do this transfer on death deed, even though I don't know, I may wind up in a nursing home because I want it to kind of give me peace of mind that at least it's done in case I need it. So, but I use this most commonly as a last minute way to cut off the state's right.
So I feel like you are preaching a very similar theme that we preach is yes, there's things we can do last minute, but proactive planning will still make things easier for everyone.
Yes, yes, indeed. All right. Now, let's say you've gone into a nursing home. Let's say you own a home, but let's say you're a single person. You don't have anybody else to depend on except you. Let's say you don't have children, or if you do have children, maybe they're not close, maybe they're not able to help you out financially. The point is, if you're a single person and you go into a nursing home, you will qualify for Medicaid once your countable assets are $2,000 or less.
Okay.
Once you qualify for Medicaid, all of your remaining money that comes from Social Security and pension, if you have one, that gets paid to the nursing home as your Medicaid copay. You are only allowed to keep $50 for your personal needs. Now, if you're a person without a cell phone, without any concern for their appearance, or without any concern for the clothing they might choose to wear, maybe $50 a month could suit you. But if you have a cell phone, you like skincare products, you like getting your hair trimmed, at least, if not, what my grandmother used to say, my hair's not dyed, it's tinted. If you like to see the beautician, to have your hair taken care of, $50 a month isn't going to cut it. And if, let's say, you go into a nursing home and you own a home, remember, if you own a home, you have all those expenses attached to it. $50 a month, you can't even pay the electric bill, let alone the taxes and insurance. All right.
I hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
So we have an option where somebody going into a nursing home today, or if they're already there, if they've got some money left, instead of spending this on care or paying off debts or home improvements, we can put it into a special needs trust. And this special needs trust creates a legal arrangement where a nonprofit organization is the trustee or overseer of the trust with your money in it. And then the funds that are held in this trust are then used for your supplemental needs. So money, you could have, I don't know, several $100,000. You could have as little as $10,000. You put that into a trust instead of just spending that on other things. Then the money in the trust could be used to pay your cell phone bill, pay your internet subscriptions, buy you goods and services. If you like snacks,
mine's going to be my subscriptions. I'm a subscription queen.
There you go. You like specialty foods delivered. There's all sorts of things, paying the taxes on your home, insurance. Now, the trade-off is whatever money remains in the trust that hasn't been used goes to the state to reimburse them for the costs paid for under your Medicaid program. And to that, I would say, so what? It's not like you have somebody else stepping forward to pay your cell phone bill out of their own pocket or cover your household expenses. This is a way for you to kind of keep things going. And again, to help this maybe come home, I've got a real life example. If you want to advance the slide, we can cover that. So our special needs trust example is Jimmy. And Jimmy's 76. He's gone into a nursing home. He has $160,000 in savings, and he's got $4,000 a month of income. He's a retired theater professor, very involved in the theater community, has lots of online subscriptions. He is coaching from his bed a young person who is directing a theater performance that's actually going to debut on Broadway. And he wants to travel to Broadway to see that performance. And even though he's been in the nursing home for several years and he's already spent $200,000 on his care, every year he's hired a medical transport company and a private nurse to basically take him to and from Broadway. And they went and lit up the town, right? Well, if you can imagine, he spends all of his money paying for nursing home care. He's going to have nothing left to even keep a cell phone bill or internet subscriptions, let alone do the future traveling he wants to do. So we can put the $160,000 into the special needs trust. It can be used for travel costs. It could be used for a nurse attendant. Some people that I have do this, if you're on Medicaid, Medicaid doesn't pay for a private room. So you've got a roommate. Some nursing homes will allow a Medicaid recipient to be in a private room if some family member or some other source is available to pay the private room fee, which might be $300 to $600 a month. So in this case, the special needs trust could be used to pay for that private room fee. I've had some clients that set this up that as they get on in advanced years, just decide, hey, I want to have a personal paid attendant sitting with me during my waking hours. The nursing home doesn't provide you with an attendant during waking hours unless it's medically necessary, and that's a rare
Mhm.
circumstance, unfortunately. And so the trust could be used to pay for a private person to be there and be your voice, be your advocate, make sure that all your needs are being met, and meet your help you do the things that you want to do, and also just have someone to talk to. So it's if you don't have a talkative roommate or someone you've made friends with, I'm sure it can be a lonely place.
Yeah, I love that. I didn't know that existed either. So that's a
Yep.
great thing.
Yep. And the funds in the trust could be used to keep the household expenses going. Yep.
That is really interesting.
Yep. So before we talk about pre-planning options, I do want to talk about one additional really unique planning option for somebody who's single, who's gone into a nursing home, and let's say you've got children. You really had wanted to, you really spent your retirement years living frugally because you wanted to leave your nest egg to your kids as an inheritance to maybe give them the leg up that you didn't have. Well, you wind up in a nursing home and you've got money in the bank, and let's say, maybe you've been renting an apartment, you don't own real estate. The money you have came from selling your home, and you don't have anything to spend it on. Maybe you've already got a new car. And so if we don't have any of the usual spending options, you're going to wind up spending that on nursing home care, and your desire to leave something to your children is going to go unmet. Well, the Medicaid rules allow something unique with life insurance. Now, life insurance that has a cash surrender value, that cash surrender is a counted asset against you. Life insurance that's either a term life insurance or a group life insurance does not have cash surrender value, and the Medicaid program doesn't care about death benefits as long as the death benefit is paid to an individual. And so there's a life insurance company that offers a very unique policy for somebody trying to qualify for Medicaid, where essentially you're able to convert dollars into death benefits. And so if I've got somebody with $50,000, instead of spending that on nursing home care, they could use that to purchase a $50,000 death benefit life insurance policy. Now, this policy, if you're a typical consumer looking for life insurance, getting a $50,000 death benefit for a $50,000 payment, that's no good, right? But if you're going into a nursing home, you've got nothing to spend it on. And if your goal is to save some money for someone else, usually kids or grandkids, then this is an option. But please, nobody run out and buy life insurance just because, or annuities, because we talked about that too. Again, I'm an attorney. I don't sell financial products, but it's just another example of some of the available tools that are out there that we can help people use if they wind up in a nursing home. Right now,
and as someone who does sell those financial products, I will back you up on this. There's thousands of different annuities and life insurance options, and people should not try to go in and do that on their own. They should definitely work with an expert in the field.
Yes, absolutely. So I want to talk now about pre-planning options for Medicaid. As I had said earlier, the best results come when you plan in advance. I've talked about some last-minute planning solutions where the 5-year look back doesn't matter. I want to emphasize these are planning solutions that from month to month, a legislative change could totally take away.
Mhm.
And so my opinion, as many other elder law attorneys are of the opinion, that the best results come with pre-planning, in part because we don't know exactly what crisis planning or last minute planning options are going to be there next month, let alone 5-10 years down the road.
Mhm.
So so again, we have to, if we're looking at pre-planning strategies, we need to look at somebody who's in decent health, who we're reasonably sure can avoid having to apply for Medicaid within 5 years. So if it looks like you're going to wind up within a nursing home in the coming months or year, you don't want to do this sort of planning. It has to be reasonable to expect your health's good enough that you'd be able to stay out of a nursing home for 5 years. And so the things to consider are protecting your home from a Medicaid lien. And remember, we talked about the transfer on death deed being able to do that. But if they change the way that the DHR collects liens, then that transfer on death deed isn't going to help. Whereas having an asset protection trust set up to own that home would be able to help in that problem. Plus, if you go into a nursing home with a transfer on death deed, you still own the home 100%. You sell it, all that money comes to you.
Yeah.
If you've gone into a nursing home, your asset protection trust is the owner of the home. Different result. You're not getting all the money from the sale of the home. So let's go ahead and then move to the next slide, and we can talk about kind of what modern Medicaid planning methods look at. It used to be in decades gone by that an aged adult would add their adult children onto the deed. And the reason for doing that, they didn't want the state to be able to recover against that. So how that was achieved was often by making the child an owner of the property, and perhaps being co-owners with the parents on the property. The idea being that the surviving co-owners, if the kids outlived the parents, well, then once both parents have passed away, there was nothing left for the state to be able to put a Medicaid lien against. Well, and I'm sure if I've got some older folks in here listening to our conversation, their parents may have left them property the same way. But today, you don't want to put other adults, your adult children, you don't want to put them on the deed. If you've made them an owner and given them the survivorship rights to do that, you've made them a current owner. If they go through some legal problem like a divorce, caused a bad car wreck, didn't have enough insurance, got sued, lost their job, lost their health insurance, had a medical catastrophe, and now they're getting sued for unpaid medical bills. If you've made your child as a co-owner of your home, wanting to potentially avoid a future Medicaid lien, that's a bad decision in today's environment. 10, 20, 30 years ago, when adult parents did that for their adult children, marriages were typically stable. Jobs and retirement were certainly more stable and plentiful, and you didn't have all the things that tend to even come to younger people who are, by all means and accounts, seem to be in stable relationships with stable jobs.
Brent, I'll say I learned this from you, and I can right off the top of my head think of two couples this happened to. One, they lost the house because the son was on it and he went through a bad divorce, and the wife won the house and kicked the parents out.
Wow.
And in the other one, they gave it to their daughter, who great kid, great relationship, was in a really bad accident, and that house was what they placed the lien on, and they lost their house there too. So
Yeah, it really can be tragic, the results that can happen by adding, unintended, certainly unexpected results by adding somebody as a co-owner.
mhm.
So I'm talking about this thing called an asset protection trust. So what is a trust agreement? So a trust agreement is a legal agreement that allows you to own assets for your use and enjoyment, but without them being owned in your individual name. So, and I'm calling it an asset protection trust because its goal is to shelter assets from the Medicaid spend down process, or from having to be, or from the state's right to recover. So, a Medicaid compliant trust agreement, this asset protection trust I'm talking about, legally avoids the state's right to go against assets for nursing home care costs paid under Medicaid. It also prevents the assets owned by the trust from having to be liquidated, sold, and spent. So when you set up a trust like this, it has to be irrevocable, which simply means you don't have the legal right to cancel it. Because if you do have that right, then the assets owned by it are not protected. The assets owned by the trust are not counted against you. All right. Um, you have indirect control over the assets. You don't have direct control. We'll get into that in just a little bit, but you have indirect control over the assets, and you have flexibility. So you can change who the manager of your trust is. That's called the trustee. You can change the beneficiaries. If your home is owned by it, you can sell the home by a different one, and you receive, if there's financial assets owned by the trust or rental properties, you're entitled to receive the monthly income, interest, dividends, rents, that sort of thing. If we could go to the next slide,
Yes.
please. Okay. So as I said, the trust has to be irrevocable, because if it was revocable, you could cancel it and it wouldn't be protected. Somebody other than you or your spouse has to be the trustee. Think of that person as the manager. There has to be limited access to for you to the assets owned by the trust, because if you had full, complete control and access to all assets in the trust, then they're not protected. And we have the 5-year look back rule. You have to both establish the trust and put ownership of the asset into it at least 5 years before an application for Medicaid is submitted.
All right.
All right. So, couple things. When you set up a trust like this, you can't be your own manager. Most of my clients would pick the person who is going to be the executor of their estate. So if we have 3 kids and the client decides they want their oldest child, their oldest son, to be the manager of the trust, the legal word is trustee, I would say that is what I would consider a downside, because now the manager of the trust is going to have to do your bidding. All right. What duties and responsibilities does the manager of your trust have? Well, if the only thing that your trust owns is your home, really the manager of your trust isn't going to have any active duties, because you're going to continue to pay the taxes, insurance, repairs, maintenance, upkeep, that sort of thing. And if you succeed in staying in the house until you're passing, then at your death, the trust ends. Now your oldest son that you've made the manager of the trust has a job to do. Follow the instructions in your trust paperwork. And the trust paperwork will say, just like a will, at my death, my home goes to my 3 kids. All right. Now the manager of your trust has one job to do. get an attorney to write a simple property deed that changes ownership of your home from your trust to the 3 kids, and they're done. All right. Now, if you want to sell your home while you're living, no problem. The home could be sold. Your manager has to be involved in the process. Now, you might very well go ahead and do the legwork, get the realtor, find the buyer, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And then when it comes time to complete the purchase transaction, you have to sign the deed, because the way I set this up, you have lifetime rights to the property reserved in your deed for your residence home. Your manager also has to sign the deed because, well, he's the manager of the trust. Now, remember when I said this can be a downside? Well, if your son is obedient, does everything mom and dad ask, this really isn't a downside, all right? But if this is the time where your son decides, I'm going to try to assert my authority over my parents, no, mom and dad, I'm the manager of the trust. You can't sell the home unless I sign the deed, and I won't let you. Now, his mama's going to remind him, I brought you into this world, I can take you out. And by that, she means, well, Mr. Van Dyson put a clause in my asset protection trust that says I can fire you. And Mr., let me tell you something. I've got 2 other kids that are going to do exactly as I say. All right. And oh, by the way, if you're not going to come around and see things my way, sonny boy, well, I can disinherit you. I can change the beneficiaries of my trust. I'll just leave your 1/3 share to your children. My grandchildren love me, would never do me this way. Now, obviously, this is funny. If this was really happening, it wouldn't be funny. All right?
No, not at all.
So when you set up an arrangement like this, you can't have direct control. You can't be the trustee of your own trust, but you can have indirect control, power and influence. You can fire your trustee if they don't do your bidding. You can even disinherit them. All right. So, and if you don't have, the goal of doing something like this is ultimately to preserve an amount of wealth or property for other persons that you love. And most people who come and do this are parents of children or grandparents who are wanting to create a protected inheritance. That's what this is all about. Chances are the person you've picked, if you trust them, and they're likely going to be very thankful, or at least they should be thankful, that you've decided to do this, because they're going to work for free. They're going to do everything that you ask of them. And this is really a partnership. They get to help you preserve what it is that you've accumulated and worked hard for. And, and they're most likely going to do everything you ask. Because if the ones you would pick to do this aren't that person, then you don't want to do this. Okay.
Yeah. I've seen you do a lot of these, and I do love when they get nervous at first about it being irrevocable and that they can't make the decision. And then you point out, like, just fire them.
Yep. Could you go back to the last CD or the last slide? Thank you. Because I wanted to.
I went the wrong way.
Went the wrong way. Yep.
There we go.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry, I digressed a little bit there. I want to give you a real life example so you can best understand how this asset protection trust works. Okay. So we've got Dolores, who's 73. She's widowed with 3 adult children, and she sets up this Medicaid compliant asset protection trust. The assets she decides to put in it are going to be her home, which is worth $150,000. She's got an annuity worth $250,000. She's got stocks worth $100,000. She's got mutual funds worth $50,000, and she has a life insurance policy with an $80,000 death benefit, but it has $50,000 worth of cash value. So she's gonna put assets totaling $600,000 into her trust that are now going to be protected. If she needs to apply for Medicaid in a nursing home setting, beyond 5 years. Now, assets that she's kept direct ownership of would be her checking with 50,000, her savings with 50,000, and an IRA with 100,000. So she has free access to over $200,000 worth of financial assets. That's what I call her cushion. She has really good income. All of her assets, she has no debts. The income she has from pension and Social Security is more than enough to meet her basic expenses. She realizes that she decided to keep 200,000 of her financial assets as a cushion. Yes, if she went into a nursing home, if any part of that was left, we'd have to look at spend down options. But to do this, we want to do this in such a way that the assets we've put into the trust are going to be her home, because she has lifetime rights to live there. She's going to keep living in the home anyways. That doesn't really feel like a real change. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to put those money assets into the trust that she knows she's likely not going to need to spend unless she was forced to because she went into a nursing home. Right. So that kind of sets things up, and we can move on to the next slide.
Okay.
And so, as I said, she has a lifetime estate. She has lifetime rights in her home. She can't be kicked out. The home can't be sold without her signature on it, or somebody signing for her as power of attorney to release her lifetime rights. She has income rights. All right. So we've got lots of different things. We've got an annuity that's generating interest. We've got stocks that are generating dividends, mutual funds generating dividends. Dolores has the legal right to have her manager pay the earnings on those assets, or she could choose not to collect those earnings, just let them continue to build. Now, she has limited access rights to the principal. So when you set up a trust, one of the downsides is she's given up the legal right to have the assets of the trust put back into her name, because if she had that right, well, then this wouldn't be protected from the nursing home situation. Okay.
Right.
Right. But she has the right to receive the income. So if monies are owned by the trust, in this case, she's got money in annuities and stocks and such, and the trust also owns the home, then assets belonging to the trust could be used for home improvements. So one thing Dolores could do is look to this. The money in the trust is money she could use on future home-related expenses, all right? Or it could be used for other real estate. So maybe she decides, I want that annuity cashed in and use the $250,000 to buy a beach condo in Myrtle. All right. So the trust could just change this investment in an annuity of $250,000 into an investment in a beach condo. Mm-hmm. And so the deed is not going into Dolores's name. It's going into the Dolores Smith Trust. That's the owner. All right. And if Dolores wants to, sell her stock, buy different stock, or sell her mutual funds and buy different mutual funds, that's not a problem. That could be done. Wants to maybe put that money into a CD, no problem. The manager of the trust can do any of that. It's completely flexible. But remember, the 5-year wait before we apply for Medicaid.
Yes.
Yep. All right. Okay, tax implications. The best summary of tax implications is that setting up an asset protection trust is tax neutral. You're not getting any new or different tax benefits by setting up a trust. In fact, if you set up a trust incorrectly, it could cost you in additional taxes, but we're not going to do that. So we set up Dolores's trust in such a way that it falls under the IRS's grantor tax rules. This means that the IRS disregards the Dolores Smith Trust as an entity separate and apart from Dolores Smith. the trust is going to use Dolores's social security number as the taxpayer ID. Trust earnings, meaning the interest or dividends from the assets owned by the trust, the 1099 or 1098 IRS form that gets issued at the end of the year, it's going to say Dolores Smith Trust, but it's going to have Dolores's social security number. And the grantor trust rules then allow her to simply attach those 1099s and 1098s direct to her personal income tax return and pay the income tax on trust-owned assets on her own personal return. So there's no need to file separate income tax returns for trusts. And when we set up this trust, because we leave her with what's called a testamentary power of appointment, that means that's her ability to change the ultimate beneficiaries of the trust. That means that the assets owned by it get what's called a stepped up investment cost basis at her death, which is a really important consideration. So in setting up the trust, I've designed it in such a way that all of the tax benefits that an individual has are preserved, because we don't want to create a trust that's going to be treated by the IRS as a complete, separate, distinct entity. Otherwise, we could lose the opportunity to pay earned income at the personal tax rates, and because we could lose that step up in basis. Okay, then the next slide. We can submit an application for Medicaid after 5 years. So Dolores sets up and funds the trust. As I said, she must wait the 5 years. She goes into a nursing home for 5 years. I put in here, she can apply for Medicaid. I mean, the reality is we've created a complex trust, what I would consider to be a complex trust agreement. When it comes to applying for Medicaid, even if you've set up a trust agreement like this, you really need to hire an elder law attorney to still do the Medicaid application. And obviously I do that for my clients, simply because, the DHHR that processes the applications, we have social workers on the DHHR side who are processing these applications. They're not attorneys. Certainly they would have access to attorneys, but typically these are social workers at the local office or at their regional or state-centered policy office that are giving interpretive, making the interpretive decisions. Okay, and so whenever we submit a Medicaid application on behalf of one of our clients who have set up one of these asset protection trusts and more than 5 years has gone by, we're explaining to them why this trust is set up in the manner that it was. Because remember the trust I said that you could set up last minute, but that has to have a state repayment clause?
Yes.
Well, this asset protection trust we set up for clients as a pre-planning option does not have to have that state repayment clause because it gets done more than 5 years. Well, inevitably, the folks at the DHR will often look at this and say, oh, it doesn't have the state repayment clause. This isn't a permitted trust. And then we have to go back and explain to them, yes, these are permitted. Here's the reason why. And then once we direct them to that part of their policy regulations, and then they understand.
And that makes sense because, you and I both know, not only are these complicated, but DHHR can unfortunately be short-staffed often. And so
it's pretty much they're short-staffed always.
Yeah.
I think the numbers, like they have statewide, I think the number is 35 employees that do these applications.
Wow.
Yeah. And, that's a lot.
That's a whole lot.
That's a whole lot. And the wonderful people who work for the DHHR that do these applications, they are amazing. And, they have big hearts just like you and I do too. Especially in the smaller counties, it might very well be their favorite school teacher who's gone into the nursing home, and they're looking at the application and they're thinking, oh gosh, I don't want to see them spend any assets more than I want to see anybody else spend. But it gets
Yeah.
to be very, very personal. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think the best summary of why do the pre-planning, and again, remember, you're only going to do this if your ultimate goal is to save assets, most likely for your kids or grandkids, or maybe, your nieces and nephews are just as close as the children you never had. And so you're going to want to do that for them. Or maybe, you've got strong ties to your church community or a charity, and you're willing to undergo, kind of the limitations that are put in place. And this could also be an option for you. But peace of mind and legacy preservation, that's really why you're doing this. Okay. And it's not going to be for everybody. I've got some clients who just do this for their real estate assets. Particularly if you have real estate other than your home and you go into a nursing home, I bet it's worth more than $2,000. And if it is, it's a countable asset. And boy, having, if you've got the family farm but don't live there, or you've got the hunting camp or the beach condo, let's put rental property, let's put that into ownership and an asset protection trust and get through the 5 years. Otherwise, you'd be looking at a forced sale, and you can't then just sell it to your kids for $1. So that really winds up being a great plan to have in place.
Yeah.
So key takeaways: early planning is critical. Professional guidance is essential. We've got multiple strategies available, and having balanced goals, because it's not just forming this plan on paper. We've got to consider all of the issues. And you want to get complicated? All right, let's throw a blended family in there, right?
Yes.
I've grown up in a blended family. I have a blended family. I understand. There's all sorts of issues that can be intertwined with this. So figuring out a way to balance and meet all goals, because if this really is legacy planning, we then also have to contend with, who the beneficiaries are. Are they going to get along at the process of winding up your affairs? Hey, at least assets owned by a trust don't go through probate, so at least that goes fairly quickly. But we need to make sure all of those things are attended to as well.
And Brent, I'm just going to throw in there, I say this all the time too, but when parents do this advanced planning, it makes it so much easier on the kids, because the kids aren't trying to figure out what would mom have wanted to do with this money. How should we spend this? Like, it's a totally different thing to be carrying out the wishes of your parents than guessing what they wanted.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So when do we pull in an elder care attorney like yourself?
Sure. So if somebody's already in a nursing home, it's not too late. You can hire me to go through the Medicaid process, use any of the strategies that we've talked about, a single person in a nursing home to a married couple. I mean, we've got so many options for last minute planning. But if you're, at the start of your retirement journey, setting up a trust like this may be appropriate for you. As I said, it's not going to be for everybody, but have a consultation with us to see, we can walk through with you based on your specific financial and other planning goals and family situation. How would this work? And if we would recommend it. If you have a loved one who's about to go into a nursing home, you can have a consult with us to what would it look like if we hire you, and what are you going to be able to save? So if and when that person does go, you're already aware of what can be done, and you're at least maybe prepared a little bit better. Because certainly if I have people come to me a few months before their loved one goes in a nursing home, there's usually a couple things that would be ideal to do right then, instead of having to try to cram it all into a couple week period of time. And as I said, the best results come from working with an elder law attorney.
Yes. So you're the elder law attorney I refer all of my clients to. So we've had very, very positive experience with you. But for anyone who wants to get in touch with Brent, his information's on here. We'll be sending out a newsletter with contact information. Is there anything you'd like to say about yourself and how to contact you before we end?
Sure. So I split time between my Morgantown and Charleston office. I have full-time employees at both offices. I'm typically in my Charleston office on the latter part of the week and in my Morgantown office on the earlier part of the week. I've got some clients live in Charleston with adult children in Morgantown. They may choose to come see me in my Morgantown office only because it's convenient. They can combine it into maybe a trip to see their children and grandchildren too. Call my office, make an appointment. We'll sit down, review your situation, and can give you information as to recommendations we would have for your situation.
All right. Well, thank you again. I'm so thankful I get to share your information with more people because you've just been a godsend to so many of my clients. So thank you again, Brent.
All right. Thanks for having me, Tabitha.
All right. Have a wonderful day.
Oh, thanks. You too.